thank the Center for organizing discussion on this subject. This subject actually, and I'm really grateful also for providing me an opportunity to speak about something to which I actually devoted some years of my career, and there was sometimes a very lonely struggle. But then there were people like George Matthew, and it was a good partnership. It was actually a very interesting time, and I am actually referring to the time 1996 to 2001, when I came as Joint Secretary to Government of India. And then when I went back as Principal Secretary Finance. And during the later period of my stint as Joint Secretary, we were also working on guidelines for panchayats for maintenance of accounts and their audit. So when I went back, it was like one had to, travel in the bus that one had actually set up or implement what had been produced here in Delhi in the Office of the Controller and Auditor General, and in consultation with the Ministry of Finance and the Ministry and the Department of Rural Development, which is where I was working. So the subject actually is so timely, and one has had occasion to see how the entire constitutional structure actually can either be enforced or it can be jettisoned by the individual approach of individual officers. The system in India is very personalized, very individualized. And when during my return again to Delhi after my stint in Kerala, I was put in charge of Ministry of Panchayati Raj that was created then. I was pulled out of the ministry to which I had actually come on deputation, and then we set about creating the Ministry of Panchayati Raj, and there were a series of roundtables with state governments on various subjects. At that time, we had of course a very energetic minister who was very, very pro-panchayats. But let me go back to 96. In 96, actually, it was just 3 years. The panchayats actually had, the Panchayati Raj, the 73rd Constitutional Amendment actually came into force in April 1993. And so we were just very young at that time. But it was very good for me to discover, very heartening to discover, that from the Department of Rural Development to Planning Commission and to many other entities such as the Chief Secretaries of States, very strong letters had gone, saying that now the Constitution has actually recognized panchayats as constitutional entities, as entities of self-government, not as some kind of societies or samitis or stuff like that, but they are governments. And a whole lot of things were listed out in those letters, and subsequently, in fact, we began to compile all these letters that had been written. Now, you see, that was also a period of struggle, even though the ministry was sending very unequivocal messages. At the state level, we found that even elections are not being held. And I remember that we were prosecuting state governments. I remember going once to the Supreme Court and finding that even like it was a Saturday and our advocates on record had not come. And a whole bunch of things had to be actually, the matter was coming up in the court on Monday. So the kind of Saturday that we spent, in fact, even the special registry was kept open for us till 3 p.m., which is normally on Saturdays it closes by 1. So we were actually sprinting in the corridors, taking court-free stamps from, private advocates. Because when you, give your claims in, there are so many formalities. Even delivering by hand the claim that we were filing or our counter affidavit to the representatives of the government of, say, in this instance, Bihar. So it was an exciting time. It was like, we were all ready for the good fight, and we were, I think, on elections, we began to be successful. They began to hold elections. In the meantime, within 2 months of my coming to Delhi, we had this bill in the Parliament, and this was Panchayat's extension to Scheduled Areas Act. So that also was, actually, it was a revolutionary piece of legislation, in the sense that it recognized the fact that, the report on which it was based, that report had so many other things. But we brought it down to the basics of what actually needed to be done in order to ensure that the tribal societies managed to have local governance that was suited to their ethos. That we did not mindlessly extend panchayats to Schedule 5 areas without any recognition of the fact that these tribal societies had certain traditional rights which had been recognized by just about everybody. Now, very interestingly, again, Odisha government challenged this matter, and somehow they managed to get the Attorney General to appear for the state of Odisha. In a file, a big fat file. We just carefully going through it, I found that India's law officer was going to appear in a matter that would actually oppose a law that was that was actually passed by the Union of India. So I had to run. Constantly, I remember being on the run most of the time. So I went and told him that, sir, this is actually something in which you cannot enter appearance because there will be clash, there will be conflict of interest, and it would be very embarrassing. So he was actually stunned. He called his juniors, and now, of course, to cut a long story short, he actually withdrew from the case. We began actually by and by to win cases in Jabalpur High Court, in Bombay High Court, in Odisha High Court, and we had a lot of struggle in Chennai, in Tamil Nadu, where even Pondicherry joined them. They said something about, reservation for backward classes. They brought in a whole lot of red herrings and all. So there were states which had passed the law, but which would not hold elections for some excuse or the other. Andhra was one of them. Andhra would not hold election. It had drought, then it had floods, then it had this, and then it had that. That at least, looking back now, that is not the case. Elections are getting held. There may be some hue and cry like we saw in West Bengal, that the State Election Commission may get attacked. There will be a lot of apprehensions about what the outcome could be, but elections are getting held. I think this is the first, I would say, solid achievement that people have actually managed in the last several years. Recently, I went through 2 reports. There was one report in which actually, I think Manishankar Iyer was chairing it. There was an expert committee report. And then Manishankar Iyer had also called from the Indian Institute of Public Administration, somebody called Professor Alok. And Alok had done a series of reports on the status of implementation in various states. So I went through that. And recently I wrote an article for a magazine called Inclusion, where we sort of looked at number 1, number 2, number 3 status. And I find that Maharashtra, Karnataka, Kerala, Rajasthan, on paper, there's a lot of devolution. A lot of attention has been paid to Schedule 11 of the Constitution, which lists out the 29 subjects that panchayats are supposed to handle. But what you find in the fine print is that while functions may be devolved, you may not give enough money. In fact, hardly anybody other than Kerala gives enough money to panchayats. Kerala has actually been very emphatic. It's a late start on Panchayati Raj, but Kerala's Panchayati Raj has been done in a very sincere manner. In fact, as Finance Secretary, I used to find that actually we are giving more than 1/3, because we are also including in that calculation the money that's actually that of the electricity board. Be that as it may, different states actually, in very many ways, the implementation is poor. Let's accept that. And during that period also, we tried to, during the later period, that is mid-2000, 2005, we began to consult the law school at Bangalore, as it was called, law school, in law school. We went into the entire issue of whether we had actually created local governments. And the final verdict was that actually, if state elections are not held to the Legislative Assembly, and if the budget is not passed by the Assembly, actually you have a constitutional crisis. There is no such crisis if the panchayats don't get a penny. And also you have a state list, you have a concurrent list, you have a central list. But after many years of thinking of how to push the process forward, I reluctantly came to the conclusion that yes, possibly now it's the time to look at amendments again. Earlier we used to say there is the will, there is no need for a bill, etc., etc. We used to go with that, and we also took great joy in the performance and achievement of very many women, particularly many people from marginalized communities, who actually performed extremely well, I would say, particularly at the Gram Panchayat level. But the role of the civil service, this is where we come to. Maybe at some later stage, if the governments are very sincere, the central government really wants to carry the agenda of decentralization or devolution of powers forward, I think they should be thinking in terms of a panchayat list. I think it's time, possibly now, after 21 years, when you attain majority in a technical sense, to put in a panchayat list where the state government, as the case now, actually it is the state government's discretion. Article 243G does not say that the state government shall, it says, yes, in a way that, panchayats will be enabled to function as institutions of self-government. But there's so much has been left to the state government, and because at that particular point of time, to get this amendment through, these compromises had to be made. Now, let us think that this amendment, or, after all, it's a debatable point, the need for a panchayat list. Let us say, it's my opinion that there should be a panchayat list. Maybe it's not the opinion of 10 other people. But in the meantime, what is to be done? We requested actually several times the National Academy of LBS, National Academy of Administration, not only to include a module on Panchayati Raj, but to actually make Panchayati Raj the underlying theme of governance in this country. Today I was in the Union Public Service Commission, and it was very nice to hear some people who actually come up from villages and who have then gone on to IITs or gone to and work even in places like New York and who come back to India talking about the need for panchayats to be empowered if you are going to get anywhere. Because you see, basically if you just look at panchayats as being responsible for delivery of services, for education, for health, for, I would say, even social justice, the basic equity, or let us say even the status quo, unless huge amount of work is done by the civil servants who are used to, who are trained for, and whose job it is to bring that degree of rigor to skill development or to capacity building, you will not get anywhere. It is, I think anybody can see that whenever a chief minister comes who is very pro Panchayati Raj, for some time all the officers, they work very hard. They make sure that yes, panchayats powers are given, GOs will be issued, secretary this, secretary that, they will all come to the office of the secretary Panchayati Raj, and the secretary Panchayati Raj really glories in that, power that is emanating from a higher source, and a lot of things will get done. I've seen this happen in UP during Kalyan Singh's time, and then a number of other places. But if it is left as a kind of as something that will happen as a matter of course, then again it will change from district to district. It's at the level of the DM or the officer who is actually appointed to assist the district panchayat, whose entire approach to development will actually make a difference. There are district magistrates who do not think they are the repositories of wisdom, who do not think that the Mai Baap kind of Sarkar will help us in any case. We are actually operating below par. Kind of money that we are spending, we are getting nothing out of it. That is because 80% of the time, you'll be surprised to know, people don't even know what is actually intended for them. Nobody tells them. And the district level officers, even in the state like Kerala, they are quite unaccountable. Accountability is actually really not there. Of course, Kerala village panchayats are very strong. Kerala block panchayats are also pretty okay. District panchayats are also okay. But there, again, the role that they can play or their equation with the district magistrate is actually a very sensitive equation. And on that, unless we catch our officers young in the National Academy of Administration and tell them that you lose nothing, we gain in power if in the district your district is doing well. So to me, the role of the civil service actually has really not been articulated as well as it could, either at the entry level in the government. And personally, I feel that when you come to Government of India and you become, get into senior positions, everybody should do a 3-month stint in the Ministry of Panchayat Raj. Because those of anybody who has gone and worked there, what they see transforms them. And transforms them to an approach which makes them pro-panchayats. It's much better for local people to know how to hold the teachers accountable, how to ensure the teacher comes to the village school, rather than have somebody who will just come and go, who will never be there, who will be transferred, and you'll never know where that person is gone. So this is where I am at this point of time, and well, I must say I am grateful to you for listening to my views, and in all humility, I would say that at least 8 years of my life I have really struggled to ensure that panchayats maintain accounts properly, that they get the right kind of power. But looking back, I think much more needs to be done. Insofar as panchayats extension to scheduled areas act is concerned, you can just see any website, you'll find that we have taken away, by non-implementation of this law, we've created the Naxalism problem. 50,000 crore rupees is the value of minor forest producer loan, which is what we've snatched away. And we've handed it over to either contractors or to, the tender mercies of state corporations. So where are we? We have to think. We have to continue to think. Thank you very much.